Hey guys, tonight we will delve into a historical figure whose brutality surpasses all imagination, King Henry VIII of England. Tonight, we will not just talk about failed marriages, but we will explore 99 chilling facts about the life of Henry VIII, details so disgusting and terrifying, they might just make you cry yourself to sleep. The story we are about to hear right now is enough to send shivers down your spine. Henry VIII once allowed thousands of maggots to live and breed in the necrotic wound on his leg. Why? He believed they were doing God's work, digesting his sins. And more importantly, these maggots whispered court secrets, the most cryptic prophecies, exclusively into the king's ear. Imagine the horrifying scene as the court physicians watch the most powerful king in England. Count the writhing white larvae crawling in and out of his rotting flesh, worshipping them as if they were divine messengers. That is the true picture of Henry's sick psychology and his divine power delusion. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I am eager to know where our sleep story community is gathering from. Please leave a comment letting me know which country you are watching from and what time it is in your local area. I love witnessing our night owls from around the world gather to listen to these dark historical tales. And if you think the opening story was brutal enough, wait until we dissect fact number 79. A shocking detail involving Henry VIII's pathological jealousy toward one of his unfortunate wives. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Fact 1. The unwanted heir. Henry VIII was never meant to be king, but merely the spare, standing behind his elder brother, Arthur. When Arthur died on April 2nd, 1502, the 15-year-old Henry, who had received virtually no formal preparation, was thrust into the role of heir apparent. That crushing sense of being a backup left him with a lifelong need to prove he deserved the crown, fueling ruthless displays of power and control throughout his realm. Fact 2. We find that despite mastering 4 languages by the age of 10, Henry's greatest pride was his muscular calves. He donned tight hose and doublets to flaunt these leg muscles, commanding courtiers and even foreign ambassadors to lavish praise upon them or face severe punishment. This early vanity about his physique would haunt him in later years, as age and illness slowly eroded the very body he once celebrated. Fact 3. The King's Grim Concert. Henry treasured his hurdy-gurdy, mockingly nicknamed hurdy-gurdy, whose screeching drone sounded more like a dying creature than music. Courtiers dared not criticize. To do so risked their lives. He also maintained more than 70 hunting dogs, each named after a mythic beast, and trained them on condemned prisoners, turning innocent animals into tools of torture. Fact 4. The Cosmic Monarchy. Henry governed by astrology, delaying military campaigns, royal marriages, and even executions until the stars aligned. Court astrologers lived in constant terror. One incorrect forecast could earn them a quick trip to the block. Thus, the entire court existed under a pall of celestial fear. Fact 5. The Teenage Epic. As a youth, Henry penned a love poem, comparing himself to Hercules, boasting of godlike strength and legendary exploits. He forced tutors and courtiers to read it aloud and shower him with praise. Any failure brought harsh reprisals. This early narcissism foreshadowed the violent, self-adoring monarch he would become. Fact 6. The Bedroom Terror. Henry once disguised himself as a stranger to frighten Queen Catherine in her own bedchamber, a chilling display of his absolute power over the most intimate moments of court life. He would hide in closets or behind tapestries, spying on servants, family members, and even his own wives, turning privacy into a luxury only he could afford. Fact 7. We find Henry's thrill for jousting and tilting. At 25, during a grand tournament at Greenwich on October 27th, 1530, he fought so fiercely that his armour was rent from flesh to bone, scraps of hair tearing away with the metal. Opponents tiptoed around, defeating him too easily. Victory by overwhelming force risked whispers of treason, so each tilt became a gladiatorial spectacle. Henry inhaled that edge of death danger like a draught of mead, craving the shudder that came with every crack of splintering lance. Fact 8 reveals the king's macabre kennels. Henry maintained over 70 hunting dogs, each named after mythic monsters Cerberus, Hydra, Chimera, and the like. Royal kennels at Hampton Court reeked of blood as captives served as living lures, training these beasts to maul and tear, feeding executed prisoners' flesh to hounds as routine practice laid bare a cruelty beyond mere sport. Fact 9. The lethal cocktail. Henry favoured a brew of ale fortified with wine and brandy, so potent it would fell a warhorse. Courtiers earned their lives by first tasting it to prove it was not poisoned, and many died for that duty. Continuous intoxication eroded his judgment, stoking paranoia and fueling a thirst for conflict both at the council table and on the battlefield. Fact 10. The scrawl of power. Henry's handwriting grew so ornate curlicues, loops, and emphatic strokes that only royal secretaries could decipher it. Any mistake in transcription, however slight, might cost a scribe his head. By rendering his own script unreadable to all but the chosen few, Henry wielded the pen as a blunt instrument of authority. Fact 11 emerges. After age 40, Henry suffered from sexual impotence. Physicians from the newly introduced Western medical schools tiptoed around the subject, cloaking their diagnoses in euphemism. Stripped of his virile image, the king's desperation burgeoned into violence, an unending series of abuses and torture against women in his household. Fact 12. An obsession with virginity. Henry ordered his queens stripped and examined by court physicians, who then offered public reports on their purity. These invasive inspections, conducted before assembled nobles, robbed women of dignity and privacy, turning their bodies into royal property to be appraised and declared fit or false. Fact 13. We uncover Henry's desperate quest for virility. Royal physicians in 1527 compounded powders of crushed rhinoceros, horn, dried goat testicles, and curious herbs nettle, mandrake, and exotic roots, hoping to concoct an elixir of masculine power. Henry consumed each dose ravenously, never questioning their efficacy. When the potions failed, his faith in medicine crumbled, deepening his paranoia and distrust of even the most learned physicians. Fact 14 reveals a cruel lesson in refusal. At a banquet in 1532, Henry presented a flawless diamond to a noblewoman as an invitation to his bed. When she declined, he seized her family's estates and imprisoned her father on vague charges. This ruthless retaliation sent a chilling decree. No subject may deny the king, for to refuse is to invite ruin. Fact 15. The bedroom spy network. Henry deployed maids, grooms, and chamber servants as informants tasked with noting every movement, every twitch in the queen's sleep, even her menstrual cycle. Those who faltered faced interrogation and torture until their reports satisfied the king's paranoia. In the hush of night, every sigh in the royal bedchamber echoed with the terror of surveillance. Fact 16. A smear campaign cloaked as explanation. When Henry sought to annul his marriage to Anne of Cleves in 1539, he publicly accused her of foul breath. Courtiers repeated the slander, and the Queen's reputation endured as a mark of disgrace long after her departure. The lie became law, forever staining her name. Fact 17. The shift from poetic praise to executioner's blade. Catherine Howard was lauded as the rose without a thorn when she wed Henry in 1540. Mere days later, she stood accused of adultery and was beheaded on February 13, 1541. In the blink of an eye, his adoration morphed into lethal wrath, a testament to his capricious and deadly affection. Fact 18. We glimpse Henry's swift indifference. On the very day following Anne's interment, July 8, 1540, he became betrothed to Jane Seymour. There was no mourning, only the cold calculus of succession. His heart had no room for grief, only for the next bride who might bear him a son to secure his legacy. Fact 19. Henry forbade his queen from wearing any gown that revealed even the faintest hint of skin, insisting she be swathed in garments so constrictive and fully covered that she resembled a silkworm in its cocoon. This was not a matter of protecting her chastity, but rather an exercise of absolute bodily control, ensuring that no man's gaze could ever wander without the king's express permission. Fact 20. Many leading historians now believe that Henry VIII contracted syphilis in the early 1520s. Medical researchers point to contemporary descriptions of skin lesions, joint pain, and cognitive decline, as well as the repeated miscarriages and stillbirths suffered by his queens. If this diagnosis is correct, it implies that Henry unwittingly transmitted the disease to his wives, and yet he continued to demand healthy male heirs, a cruel approach that verges on the inhuman. Fact 21. During his reign, Henry ordered the execution of over 70,000 individuals, men and women accused of heresy, treason, or even idle gossip. The Tudor court lived in a constant haze of terror, and ordinary subjects obeyed not out of loyalty, but from a grim fear of losing their heads. Fact 22. One of his most notorious spectacles was the boiling to death of alleged soup poisoners. The condemned were bound and submerged in cauldrons of scalding water as the king stood by, offering commentary on their final shrieks. Those screams echoed through the castle for hours, haunting every stone corridor with a nightmare melody. Fact 23. Henry further ordered conservative monks who refused to acknowledge him as head of the Church of England to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. He would dine beside their empty coffins, treating their massacre as a grotesque form of entertainment. This religious purge spread a wave of dread through every abbey and parish in the realm. Fact 24. To prevent any discussion of his mortality, Henry imposed a law making it high treason to predict the king's death. Astrologers and physicians dared not mention his health, fearing instant execution. Under this decree, Henry came to believe himself all but immortal, severing any realistic acknowledgement of his own human frailty. Fact 25. On the 19th of May, 1536, Henry stood atop a tower in the Tower of London to watch Anne Boleyn's execution. He waved and even smiled as the executioner's blade fell. In that chilling moment, the death of his second wife became a callous public spectacle rather than a solemn tragedy. Fact 26. Finally, Henry permitted the corpses of condemned traitors to be impaled and left to rot on roadside stakes as daily warnings. Their stench permeated the streets, and children sometimes played among the decaying remains, making the king's reign a waking terror, a grim reminder that royal power extended even over the living dead. Fact 27. In July 1535, Henry VIII ordered the execution of his once trusted friend Sir Thomas More after More, refused to recognise the king's marriage to Anne Boleyn. On the 6th of July, Sir Thomas knelt on Tower Hill, his head struck off for defying royal decree, proof that no loyalty, however long, could spare a subject from the king's wrath. Fact 28. Two of Henry's 6 wives, Anne Boleyn on the 19th of May 1536 and Catherine Howard on the 13th of February 1542, were beheaded at the Tower of London. Meanwhile, other queens such as Jane Seymour and Catherine Parr spent their married lives in constant fear of that same axe, their days overshadowed by the possibility that a whispered accusation might seal their fate. Fact 29. Princess Elizabeth, born on the 7th of September 1533 to Anne Boleyn, was declared illegitimate and stripped of her rights of succession by the Act of Succession in September 1536. Sent away from court and labelled the bastard, the young princess endured exile and rejection experiences that steel-lige forged Elizabeth into the resolute monarch who would later reign for 45 years. Fact 30. Henry VIII owned over 70 hunting dogs named after mythic beasts, Cerberus, Hydra, Chimera, and more. These hounds were not mere companions but instruments of terror. Prisoners condemned for treason were sometimes used as live bait to train the dogs to attack and tear human flesh, turning royal pets into tools of torture. Fact 31. Henry famously treated public executions as theatrical spectacles. He brought food and wine into the viewing galleries, critiqued the executioner's technique, and mocked the condemned's final words as if they were lines in a play. Death, for the king, became a twisted source of amusement. Fact 32. In a shocking display of royal ego, Henry had at least one man condemned to death simply for remarking that the king too must die. This execution for stating an obvious truth mocked Henry's delusions of invincibility, showing that even casual words could cost a subject his life. Fact 33. On the 16th of July 1546, Henry watched Protestant pamphleteer Anne Askew burned at the stake on Smithfield Green. As the flames rose, he ate his dinner nearby, whistling in approval. Her slow, agonizing death was meant as a grisly warning to all who dared spread heretical literature. Fact 34. Henry VIII compiled what he called his Rage List, a document naming hundreds of perceived enemies and detailing innovative methods of interrogation and execution for each. By the mid-1530s, any courtier who suspected his own name might appear on the parchment lived in constant dread, aware that a single misstep could mean torture or death as prescribed in that chilling ledger. Fact 35. Queen Catherine Howard, Henry's fifth wife, was arrested in November 1541 on mere rumours of past indiscretions. Without a proper trial or verified evidence, she was swiftly condemned, her fate decided by gossip alone, as the king's personal whims overrode justice and compassion. Fact 36. Over his lifetime, Henry's waist grew from 32 inches to 54 inches. His corpulent figure became a symbol of gluttony and decline. By his late 40s, his bulk slowed him to a crawl, exacerbating his irritability and fueling episodes of uncontrolled rage. Fact 37. In his final years, Henry's physical decline was so severe that he required a complex system of pulleys and cranes to mount his horse. The sight of himself hoisted into the saddle enraged him. He often punished the very gentlemen ushers who operated the machinery, venting his humiliation through harsh decrees. Fact 38. A chronic ulcer on Henry's leg festered with foul-smelling pus, its stench permeating the palace corridors. Royal physicians, believing in the curative power of precious metals, packed the wound with gold leaf cloth and animal fat treatments that worsened the infection and intensified the noxious odour. Fact 39. Compounding the legion of royal scents, Henry's breath became notoriously putrid due to decaying teeth and oral infection. Courtiers routinely pinched their nostrils in his presence, while the king himself chewed raw garlic as a supposed safeguard against poisoning, unwittingly magnifying the repulsive miasma. Fact 40. To mask the combined odours of rot and garlic, St. James's Palace was daily suffused with clouds of aromatic herbs and incense. Hundreds of bundles of rosemary, frankincense, and juniper were burned, their heady smoke serving as both a makeshift air freshener and a constant reminder of the monarch's looming presence and the dread that accompanied it. Fact 41. Henry VIII's physicians collected and analysed his excrement twice daily, documenting its colour, consistency, and odour as indicators of his health. Astonishingly, decisions on state matters were sometimes postponed, until the royal stool report was favourable political campaigns delayed, while courtiers nervously awaited news of the king's digestive tract. Fact 42. Suffering profuse sweating due to obesity and illness, Henry developed painful rashes under his chest and arms. His tightly fitted garments soaked through with sweat, leaving yellowed stains and an acrid odour that aggravated his irritability and fueled outbursts of violence toward anyone who dared complain. Fact 43. Convinced that bathing would open his pores to disease, Henry avoided washing for weeks or even months at a time. His unwashed body emitted such a penetrating stench that courtiers whispered of the king's reek in hushed tones. Yet none dared voice protest, for even the faintest complaint could be construed as insubordination. Fact 44. His armour featured an extraordinarily prominent codpiece, designed to display brute masculinity. Yet this ostentatious pouch only underscored his deep-seated sexual anxieties. Court observers noted that the larger the codpiece grew, the more insecure the king seemed about his virility, turning a symbol of power into a monument of personal doubt. Fact 45. In his final years, Henry suffered from incontinence and a festering leg ulcer, forcing him to wear a fox fur diaper for comfort. This ignominious garment, lined with costly pelts, was changed in absolute secrecy, attendants swearing oaths of silence to preserve the king's dignity, even as his condition laid bare his human frailty. Fact 46. The ulcer itself often became gangrenous, oozing blood and exuding a nauseating stench. Each dressing change was excruciatingly painful, the smell so overpowering that Henry frequently erupted in rage, lashing out at any courtier unfortunate enough to be near his bedside. Fact 47. On numerous occasions, courtiers fainted in royal audiences, overcome by the odour of decaying bandages. To avoid scandal, the king's physicians stationed discreet medical rescue teams at every entrance ready to whisk away unconscious victims with perfumed water and whispered apologies, ensuring the king's reputation remained untarnished. Fact 48. In a final macabre twist, Henry VIII's sealed coffin exploded during his funeral service, the build-up of embalming gases causing the lid to burst and scatter his remains. Stray dogs soon descended upon the crypt, feasting on the fragmented corpse, an unintentional but fitting act of nature's retribution that left witnesses horrified and spread through London as the grim epitaph to a tortured reign. Fact 49. The Tudor court believed sneezes carried divine significance. Henry VIII would interpret the timing of a sneeze, whether before dawn or during a council meeting, as an omen guiding policy decisions. Courtiers, terrified of mistimed sneezes, trained themselves to stifle any sudden sniffle. A single, poorly placed ACU risked delaying treaties or being recorded as ill fate in the royal annals. Fact 50. Astrologers wielded extraordinary power under Henry's reign. The king postponed military campaigns, marriage negotiations, and even executions based on planetary alignments. When Mars appeared in retrograde on August 19, 1520, a planned invasion of France was indefinitely delayed. This heavy reliance on celestial readings birthed what courtiers called the shadow government, a cabal of readers whose forecasts dictated the fate of the realm more than any minister. Fact 51. Left-handedness was regarded as diabolical. Anyone caught using their left hand for eating, writing, or wielding a dagger could face imprisonment or worse. Records from December 3, 1530, show that Sir William Compton, a favourite courtier, was briefly detained for sipping ale with his left hand. Henry's paranoia extended to daily life. Left-handed choirboys were forced to switch, and any left-handed artifact was destroyed as evidence of satanic influence. Fact 52. The king's witch hunt was especially brutal. Beginning in 1533, Henry's government accused countless women, often midwives or herbal healers, of witchcraft. Over 100 were tortured and burned at the stake in Surrey alone. Under the guise of purging Satan's agents, these trials often served to eliminate political rivals or seize property. Flames consumed more than just the accused. They stoked fear that kept villagers in line. Fact 53. Swan meat held a sacred status, yet Henry gleefully consumed it to absorb royal strength. Banquets in the summer of 1536 featured roasted cenotaph swans, flown from Windsor, nearly 40 in a single feast. Courtiers were compelled to praise the dish's divine flavour, though swan was traditionally reserved for peacocks' fraternities. This ritualistic consumption reinforced the king's belief that eating noble creatures enhanced his sovereignty. Fact 54. Henry's obsession with the colour red verged on mania. He donned scarlet satin doublets, crimson hose, and a ruby-red cloak for every public audience. On March 2, 1527, he refused to convene the Star Chamber because the new scarlet tunic he commissioned was 2 shades too pale. Advisors learned never to broach serious matters unless the king's attire matched his exacting red spectrum. In Henry's mind, the right red hue conferred martial vigour. Without it, he believed his authority waned. Fact 55. Henry VIII was convinced that evil spirits could invade through open pores, so he insisted on sleeping with talismans and potions beneath his pillow each night. His pillow often bulged with small leather pouches of protective herbs, vials of scented oils, and scraps of animal hide. These implements, rather than granting peace, disrupted his rest. The royal apothecaries draped also in roles as court exorcists were ordered to refresh the charms daily or whenever the king's mood soured. Fact 56. In Henry's court, the word fat became forbidden speech. By decree issued on October 15, 1539, no subject noble or commoner could speak the term. Instead, they resorted to euphemisms like ample of form or well endowed in subcutaneous regions. Even royal proclamations and poetry were censored to eliminate any reference to the king's expanding girth. Fact 57. A single grin could spare you or condemn you. Whenever Henry cracked a wry joke, courtiers and executioners alike were compelled to laugh aloud, even as a traitor's neck lay on the block. These forced laughter drills became routine during beheadings at Tower Hill. A timid smile, or worse, silence risked suspicion of disloyalty and could result in a swift reprisal. Fact 58. The king's court jester, dubbed the Royal Wonder, earned more than many dukes. In the winter of 1542, Henry granted his favourite fool an annual stipend of £2,000, a fortune exceeding that of most peers. The monarch believed that only a constant stream of laughter could temper his paranoia. Hence he trusted jesters' words over those of seasoned ministers. Fact 59. Henry staged grand theatrical pageants in which he cast himself as the hero. On Midsummer's Eve, 1537, a lavish masque at Whitehall presented the king rescuing Britannia from mythical foes. Every courtier was obliged to attend and applaud on cue. The spectacle served less as entertainment than as propaganda, bolstering the king's own self-image and ensuring that every clap reinforced his perceived greatness. Fact 60. Driven by an obsession with Arthurian legend, Henry commissioned a circular fortress dubbed the Round Castle on the banks of the Thames. Construction began in January 1538, yet the structure was never completed or occupied. Its towering stone walls and unfinished battlements remain a testament to the king's extravagant historical delusions and the drain they inflicted on the royal treasury. Fact 61. Henry VIII claimed he beheld angels before every joust and tilt, insisting these celestial visions marked him as divinely chosen and invincible. He first reported such an encounter at Greenwich on May 22nd, 1530, when he was merely 17. Witnesses say he paused mid-lance before shouting, "The angels approve!" a proclamation that deepened his courtiers' awe and fear, for who dared doubt a king anointed by heaven itself? Fact 62. In September 1544, Henry summoned a public book burning of works, authored by Catherine Parr, his sixth queen, after she dared debate him in theological correspondence. Over 100 pages of her treatises were fed to the flames on Tower Hill. By reducing her learned voice to ash, Henry silenced a woman whose scholarship threatened his absolute authority. Fact 63. When Jane Seymour died, giving birth on October 24, 1537, Henry declared her his true wife, for in death she could no longer disappoint him. He commissioned her effigy alongside his tomb at Windsor, praising her obedience. This twisted martyrdom revealed how swiftly affection could turn to possession, and how love for Henry often demanded ultimate sacrifice. Fact 64. Merely 5 days after Catherine Howard's execution on February 13, 1542, Henry hosted a lavish masque at Whitehall. Nobles, still mourning their former queen, were commanded to dance and toast his continued reign. The jarring juxtaposition of grief and gaiety underscored his ruthless practicality. Celebration would blot out sorrow at the snap of his fingers. Fact 65. Henry's legal and psychological torment of his wives began long before formal annulments. Anne Boleyn was confined to the Tower in May 1536, accused of treason and adultery. There, she endured isolation, interrogations without counsel, and the constant knowledge that her reputation would be shredded before her marriage was legally dissolved. The process was as much ritual humiliation as it was statecraft. Fact 66. Every letter penned by Henry's queens was read aloud to him before dispatch. Both Anne of Cleves and Catherine Parr learned to self-censor, excising words of affection or concern from correspondence, lest a single phrase be construed as insolence. From 1540 until his death in 1549, monarchic social media was monitored so closely that even familial love became treasonous potential. Fact 67. In May 1536, Henry VIII accused Anne Boleyn of adultery and incest with her own brother, George Boleyn, charging them both with stealing the king's virtue. On May 19, 1536, both were found guilty and executed at Tower Hill. The incest allegation, never supported by credible evidence, served as a convenient legal veneer to remove a queen he no longer desired, proving that even bloodkin could not escape his wrath. Fact 68. Henry's surviving love letters to Anne of Cleves, written in December 1538, blend celestial reverence with erotic imagery. He described divine light illuminating thy noble calves, and likened her temples of flesh to hallowed sanctuaries. Courtiers who read these letters later confessed they felt both awed and deeply unsettled, unsure whether the king sought to worship Anne, possess her, or condemn her. Fact 69. 11 days after Anne Boleyn's execution on May 19, 1536, Henry married Jane Seymour on May 30, 1536. The rapid remarriage, undertaken partly to secure a male heir, revealed his ruthless pragmatism. Personal grief was secondary to dynastic urgency. Fact 70. Henry once flung a string of pearls into the face of a lady-in-waiting who refused his advances. According to an eyewitness account penned in February 1540, the pearls clattered against her cheek and across the tiled floor. This act of wealth-driven violence underscored how his economic power became a weapon against anyone daring to say no. Fact 71. Between 1530 and 1534, Henry dissolved over 800 monasteries across England, seizing vast church lands and treasuries. Thousands of monks and nuns were displaced. Many were imprisoned or executed. The cultural and charitable institutions these houses had provided were erased, revealing that his appetite for revenue and secular authority outweighed any professed spiritual reform. Fact 72. In 1534, Henry declared himself supreme head of the Church of England, effectively making himself pope within his realm. He demanded all clergy swear an oath of loyalty. Those who refused faced charges of treason. Parishioners were forced to choose between allegiance to Rome or to the Tudor crown, forever blurring the line between spiritual devotion and royal obedience. Fact 73. Henry VIII's break with Rome in 1534 ignited decades of bloody religious conflict between Catholics and Protestants in England. Over the next 30 years, entire communities were torn apart by shifting edicts, burnings at the stake, forced conversions, and uprisings in counties from Norfolk to Cornwall. Faith, once a source of comfort, became a double-edged sword. It could bind a parish together or tear it to pieces in an instant. Fact 74. By his late 40s, Henry's daily meals were a riot of excess. 80% of his plate comprised meat, and he dined 6 times a day. Among the delicacies he demanded were roast dormice, glazed in honey, and oven-baked swan served with almond sauce. While the poor in London and York survived on thin pottage and coarse rye bread, his banquets epitomized a humanitarian crisis, an elite indulgence set against the backdrop of widespread hunger. Fact 75. In 1537, Henry installed an ingenious, if reckless, contraption in his privy chambers, an automatic wine fountain, a simple pull of a lever-dispensed claret, malmsey, or spiced sack directly into crystal goblets. Courtiers were tasked not only with refilling barrels, but also with calming the king's moods after bouts of drunken rage, fulfilling roles part sommelier, part court physician. Fact 76. Henry forbade anyone from ever turning their back on him. In court audiences, nobles had to pivot gracefully, their feet moving sideways like dancers, forever facing the throne. A single misstep, literal and figurative, could be construed as treason. Records from the 1540s note at least a dozen minor nobles punished for accidental back-turning, some fined heavily, others briefly imprisoned. Fact 77. After a nightmare in which he saw demons lurking in every reflection, Henry ordered all mirrors in Whitehall Palace either covered or removed in 1541. For months, he lived unable to gaze upon his own face, an enforced alienation from his own image that unnerved even his closest confidants, who feared their own reflections would betray them. Fact 78. Convinced that the pungent scent of raw garlic would ward off conspiracies, Henry consumed large cloves daily. Unfortunately, his breath became so overpowering that courtiers began holding scented sachets under their noses during audiences. Rather than protecting him, the garlic habit compounded the stench from his festering ulcer and halitosis, making every royal encounter a test of endurance. Fact 79. Henry VIII meticulously compiled his List of Wrath in 1533, naming hundreds deemed enemies of the throne. Each entry detailed grotesque, creative execution methods, exposure to ravenous beasts, slow quartering, or acid baths. Courtiers whispered in dread that anyone, from a minor squire to a high lord, might awaken to find their name inscribed. The undated manuscript circulated only in cipher, yet its existence cast a perpetual shadow over Whitehall. Fact 80. Sir Thomas More, once Henry's trusted chancellor and author of Utopia, was executed on Tower Hill in 1535 for refusing to swear the Act of Supremacy. Despite having defended the king's policies in writing, More's loyalty counted for nothing when it clashed with royal prerogative. His public beheading sent a stark message that personal devotion held less weight than obedience to the monarch. Fact 81. Across his 6 marriages, Henry VIII ended the lives of 2 queens, Anne Boleyn in 1535 and Catherine Howard in 1542, on charges of treason, adultery, and witchcraft, charges often based solely on rumour or coerced testimony. The law became his personal instrument, A swift, unchallengeable decree that silenced any woman who displeased him, weaponizing justice itself. Fact 82. After Anne Boleyn's execution, her daughter Elizabeth was declared illegitimate and stripped of the title princess. The infant, branded the bastard, was sent away from court and barred from succession. Yet that same Elizabeth would ascend the throne in 1558, reigning for 45 enlightened years. Ironically, Henry's harsh renunciation fostered in her a resolve to become one of England's greatest monarchs. Fact 83. In 1540, Henry banned bowling across the realm, deeming it a distraction from martial training. Town bowling greens were razed and players fined. This prohibition of a popular pastime underscored his failure to grasp communal needs for simple recreation, stamping out public leisure in favour of his militaristic obsessions. Fact 84. On the eve of his death in 1547, Henry VIII was said to have whispered, "Monk, monk, monk." These final utterances repeated thrice hint at a rare moment of remorse for the thousands of monks and nuns he persecuted during the dissolution of the monasteries. Whether a plea for absolution or a stifled confession, the repeated word monk remains an enigmatic coda to a reign defined by piety turned persecution. Fact 85. Henry VIII's temper tantrum at the Field of the Cloth of Gold in June 1520 showed he could not bear defeat. During a friendly wrestling match with King Francis I of France, the English monarch was swiftly overthrown on the sandy ground. Rather than show sportsmanship, Henry withdrew into silence, avoided further diplomatic pleasantries, and even ordered that all references to his loss be expunged from court dispatches, turning a minor sporting event into a blot on his royal reputation. Fact 86. By the late 1530s, Henry had become convinced that cats were Satan's spies. Any feline prowling the palace precincts was seized, interrogated, and often executed for demonic conspiracy. Even the 11 court cats were confined in blackened iron cages, and servants were forbidden to mention the word cat, lest they draw royal ire. The gullibility of this decree reveals Henry's descent into paranoid delusion at the height of his reign. Fact 87. An emblem of his extravagant vanity. Henry commissioned undergarments woven entirely of golden thread and studded with tiny rubies. Though hidden from view, these gilded drawers cost the crown over £100 sterling, in 1536 equivalent to several years' wages for a skilled artisan. The undergarments were kept under glass in his private chambers, and attendants had to kneel and swear oaths of secrecy before handling them, underscoring the king's penchant for ostentatious secrecy. Fact 88. Henry's propaganda via coinage. Beginning in 1535, he issued a new gold sovereign bearing his portrait with pronounced jowls, a double chin, and heavy lids. Every sovereign, half-sovereign, and groat in circulation featured this pudgy likeness, ensuring that wherever one spent money, one would be reminded of the king's eternal authority. Ironically, the swollen features mirrored the very signs of his physical decline, making the coins less flattering than intended. Fact 89. Pope Pius V formally branded Henry the most dangerous man in Christendom in a papal bull of April 1570. This denunciation sprang from Henry's dissolution of over 800 monasteries, his execution of thousands of clergy for refusing the oath of supremacy, and his forced subjugation of the Church of England. Across Europe, Catholic monarchs viewed England as a hotbed of religious violence, attributing widespread confessional wars to Henry's ruthless ecclesiastical policies. Fact 90 reveals Henry's deepest obsession, the desperate quest for a male heir. Every marriage contract from Catherine of Aragon in 1501 to Catherine Parr in 1543 was negotiated in pursuit of a son. Yet it was his daughter Elizabeth, dismissed as a bastard, who ultimately succeeded him, reigning from 1558 to 1593. Ironically, the heir he scorned became England's greatest monarch, proving that in the end, lineage and legacy transcended his single-minded ambition. Fact 91. Henry VIII was a fervent dancer. He led the royal dance troupe with over 10 distinct dances at every evening masque. This unbridled passion for courtly choreography contributed to his chronic gout, which first struck both ankles in 1530 and recurred intermittently until his death in 1549. Each grand ball would see the king donning his finest satin doublet and worsted hose, dutifully guiding his partners through intricate pavans and galliards, often wincing as the joint pain flared. Fact 92. The king mandated that each county supply the court with at least 500 black hens per year to stock the famous Tudor feast. Beginning in 1520 and formalised by royal decree in January of 1524, this annual tribute served dual purposes: culinary abundance and a blatant symbol of regal dominance. The ebony-feathered birds were sometimes paraded before a feast, their plumage daubed with the red and white Tudor rose to reinforce the crown's authority. Fact 93. In 1526, Henry established the Office of Security Levies, a specialised bureau tasked with collecting a safety fee from every merchant passing through London, York, and Southampton. By the fiscal year ending Michaelmas of 1526, these levies contributed fully 20% of the royal treasury's annual revenue. Merchants who failed to pay risked confiscation of goods and public whipping. Fact 94. Between 1530 and 1531, Henry ordered the planting of 30,000 crimson roses at Hampton Court, believing their hue would draw forth life's vitality. Seedlings were imported directly from the royal gardens of Paris, at great cost to the exchequer. The resulting Scarlet Cavalcade became renowned, though many of the imported cultivars struggled to survive England's damp summers. Fact 95. In the summer of 1527, Henry VIII opened the armour exhibition at Watford, displaying over 100 suits of plate and mail armour acquired from across Europe. Citizens and visiting dignitaries paid a groat each for admission. The event not only celebrated the king's martial prestige, but generated a fresh stream of income, estimated at £500 of sterling by Michaelmas of 1527. Fact 96. The king concealed a secret vault beneath Hampton Court Palace, containing hundreds of ancient vellum manuscripts, Latin and Greek texts acquired from the Vatican Library after the Act of Supremacy in 1534. Rumour holds Henry feared that undisclosed theological and philosophical writings might undermine his newly declared supremacy over the Church of England. The hidden repository was resurfaced only in 1562 by a glover's apprentice who reported cobweb-clad shelves lined with scrolls dating back to the 4th century. Fact 97. In 1537, Henry VIII instituted the daily repast ledger, mandating that each court steward record every detail of the royal table: the dishes served, the exact head count of guests, the variety and quantity of wines consumed. By the end of each year, these entries filled no fewer than 200 folio pages. This meticulous chronicle provides modern historians with an unprecedented window into Tudor culinary culture, from January's pickled eels to December's spiced boar, and reveals the precise protocol of feast day ceremonies. Fact 98. Henry pioneered the first pigeon post experiments in England in 1532, releasing over 200 homing pigeons to establish early warning communication between artillery forts along the River Thames. Each dove was outfitted with a tiny parchment tube tied to its leg, carrying urgent dispatches from Tilbury Fort to the Tower of London. The trial succeeded in delivering messages within 2 hours over a distance of 25 miles, laying groundwork for official courier services decades later. Fact 99. Within his private treasury of faithful quills, Henry preserved more than 30 feather pens crafted from the plumage of prized birds eagle, swan, and peacock each, representing a binding treaty or royal decree. He believed the choice of quill imbued the written word with its own destiny: a swan's plume for peace accords, a peacock's feather for marriage contracts, an eagle's barb for declarations of war. The collection remained on display in his study, behind gilded glass, with each pen labelled by date and purpose, from the Treaty of Greenwich in 1530 to the annulment of Anne of Cleves's marriage in January of 1539. And now, as the lights in the Tudor castle have gradually dimmed behind walls that once echoed with the crack of whips, the roar of voices, and the sounds of power, let us slow our breathing, allowing our spirits to drift gently back into a comfortable armchair. The story of Henry VIII, with its myriad shadows and the imperfections of a man both mighty and lonely, is not merely a reminder of how wielded power can crush body and soul, but also a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest limits when superstition, fear, and ambition usurp the self. Through each fact we have uncovered, every chilling or peculiar detail does more than startle us. It invites us to ponder the value of courage, empathy, and the yearning for healing. For when power is entrusted to a heart incapable of sharing its loneliness, it easily becomes a sword that severs all connections and every ounce of trust. Conversely, the smallest lives, like the silent maidens who quietly wipe away blood, or the poet-scholars who raise their verses amid confinement, can keep the flame of compassion burning, illuminating our path through long, windless nights. So when this tale draws to a close, allow those chaotic images to dissolve like morning mist, giving way to the soothing breath of sleep. Picture yourself drifting down a simple wooden boat, gliding along a tranquil river, where the only sounds are the gentle splash of oars and the soft lullaby of dusk. Every whisper, every tender note, now cradles you as though sung just for your soul. This story offers us a message about the need for caution when granting power, yet also plants in our hearts a desire for connection and sharing. Only when we dare to face our inner darkness, bravely admit our weaknesses, can we kindle the torch of hope for the future. That is the most precious gift history bestows, the belief that no matter how thick the darkness, a single spark of human kindness and wisdom can light the way out. And now, take a deep breath. Let your shoulders drop, close your eyes, and feel the gentle rhythm of your heartbeat as you drift toward dreamland. We will meet again on the next adventures. Stories yet untold, secrets yet uncovered, and above all, life lessons and historical insights guided by this warm, familiar voice. Sleep well, and if you are still awake, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our newest, best, and most profound videos. Good night, sweet dreams.